All right, great American. We're going to move on here. Again, once I figure out that Google form, I'll get your quiz up. It can be open note, open PowerPoint, open video, whatever it is you guys need during this interesting time. Hopefully you guys are enjoying break and not running off to Florida like all the college kids who just aren't taking this seriously. But hey, whatever. I guess it's not my place to criticize, but I will anyway. So here we go. We have just landed an Operation Torch, and George Patton will take over the army coming from the western side of Africa, while Bernard Montgomery is coming from the eastern side, squeezing Erwin Rommel's famed Africa Corps between them. But they do not close the gap in time before several 100,000 Germans make it out to the island of Sicily, not too far from the Italian mainland. And so this will set up Operation Husky. Some of it works and some of it does not. The invasion of the Mediterranean island of Sicily. And so it's going to happen in July and August 1943 to try and trap these Germans on the island before they reach the mainland. Patton has said we want to stop them, capture them before they get out of Africa. We don't want to have to fight them the second time. And now they are. And the problem is going to pit these two wildly egotistical generals against each other. One is George Patton, American. The other one is General Bernard Montgomery, Patton's 7th Army, and Montgomery's famed army that he is going to lead, especially with the Guards Armor Division. But we'll get there later. And the problem is going to happen right away between Montgomery's attack plan and Patton's attack plan. What Patton proposes is that he land in Palermo and race across the top of Sicily, while Montgomery land at Syracuse and come up the road here through the city of Catania. What they want to do is trap the Germans in the middle, according to Patton. So if the Germans turn to block him on the north road, then Montgomery can easily shoot in to Messina and trap them. If the Germans turn and fight Montgomery here on the eastern side of the island, then Patton can shoot across the top and trap them in Messina, making it so no matter what the Germans decide is the wrong plan. Well, that is not what is going to be chosen. Montgomery's 8th Army, what he wants to do is say, I want to land in Syracuse and go up to Messina, but I want Patton to land in the Gulf of Gala. They are going to protect my flank. They'll hold the Germans down while I can zoom up the coast road and get to Messina, which I should be able to do in 2 or 3 days. We figure 20 miles a day, we should get there in a couple days. Now, this is the first time Montgomery is going to say something like this. It will rear up again, as I mentioned earlier, with his Guards Armor Division, the 30th Corps, and the ill-fated Operation Market Garden. And what Montgomery's justification is, if him and Patton are separated with the Germans in the middle like a pie wedge, they could each be turned and chopped up piecemeal. And Patton is a military historian, and he says it's Palermo, it's the way this has got to be done, but everyone knows that. So they're going to shift, and Patton will land with his 7th Army right in the Gulf of Gala, right in front of the high, rigid mountains where the German artillery and tanks are, right in the strongest part of the German defenses. And Patton and his 2 assistants, Omar Bradley and good old Lucian Prescott, are going to have to fight through this fierce resistance, causing many American casualties. So Montgomery is going to land in Syracuse. He's going to shoot up the road to Messina. Well, Patton is going to land here in the Gulf of Gilman. Right about here by this Y is Mount Etna, this giant volcano that dominates the island of Sicily. Well, eventually Patton is going to have enough of this. In one of his wild little runs he makes, he's going to go all the way over almost to the western end of the island, capture Palermo, and race across the top while Montgomery is down here in Catania. And the problems for this attack are going to start very early on. The 82nd Airborne was dropped in Operation Torch, and very few of them actually hit their landing zones. So the 82nd Airborne is going to parachute in a day earlier to destroy some infrastructure and take out German hotbeds to prevent their tanks from coming down to the beaches and preventing the landing. And going in with this jump is going to be, who'll become a total legend, James Gavin, who will eventually be the general of the 82nd Airborne, wants to see what his paratroopers can do. Well, the problem again is this British and American coalition. They haven't figured out how to accurately be allies yet. And so as the planes are taking off at dusk, nobody told the Royal Navy. So as the American Air Armada flies over the Royal Navy that's going to deploy the land troops, the British gunners, which only makes sense, begin to open fire on the American planes. Now, very few of these American pilots, or whoever was flying the planes, had been fired at by hardcore anti-aircraft fire before, so they panic. Some climb, some dive, and some are going to break right and left, and some will just turn on their green jump light. So the paratroopers jump out. Some land in very rocky terrain and break ankles and legs. Some are going to land and drown in the Mediterranean Sea. A couple will actually drift over mainland Italy, where they are taking prisoner. It was just a debacle. But the invasion happens, and the next day Montgomery makes it ashore, and Patton is going to land again in the Gulf of Gala, where this famous picture is taken. And there's fighting going on all over the place, and once again the guys are, terrified. They're pinned down. They're trying to offload cargo, and it doesn't look like the invasion is going to succeed, and tanks begin to get ready to come down on to the beach. And two things happen. Several members of the 82nd Airborne are going to be able to get there. They're going to improvise their paratrooper tactics, and they're going to blow up and destroy a couple of these German tanks, who are then going to retreat and not assault the beach again. And Patton goes down to the beach just like he did in North Africa. What are you doing? Well, I'm offloading this cargo. Forget that flapping cargo. You grab a rifle and fight. We got to get up onto this gosh darn beach. I don't care what your job is. You're a soldier, and let's go. And once again, with Patton's presence, his fearless demeanor, his screaming and his cussing, the soldiers move inland. And slowly but surely, Patton's 7th Army is grinding its way inland. The problem for some is the coast. Montgomery was supposed to race up to Messina and be there in 2 or 3 days. And what I think with, Montgomery and Patton both had their strengths. If you could combine both men into one general, you'd be nearly unbeatable. But they were on opposite ends of the scale. Where Patton is go, 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 he who hesitates is lost. Montgomery is look before you leap. And I think this comes from his psychology of being a junior officer in World War I. If you've seen 1917, you see how horrible those decisions were. And he saw the futility of direct frontal assault. So Montgomery will attack, then he'll stop, and he'll bring up all of his support, his reserves, his support troops, his medical care, doctors, surgeons, medical supplies, gasoline, ammunition, and then he'll move again, maybe 10 or 12 miles. So he's inchworming. He doesn't want to just keep going to stretch himself out. Where Patton is like, well, the hell with them. They'll catch up later. We've got to accomplish our objective. And I get what Montgomery is doing, but sometimes Montgomery's got to be a little more Patton, and conversely, sometimes Patton has got to be a little bit more Montgomery. It's been a month, and Montgomery has barely gone 30 miles. And in the mountains near the coastal town of Catania, he's roadblocked and he's trapped. So he wants to move inland and take this mountain road where Patton is. And Patton says, well, what in the hell am I supposed to do? I'm going to have to go cross country into the mountains? That's just ridiculous. If we had used my plan, I'd have been in Messina by now. And people are like, George, for the love of God, man, quit bellyaching and let's do this. Well, Patton begins to look at the map, and this is really going to strain his relationship with his subordinate Omar Bradley and his good friend Lucian Prescott. He says, Bradley, you're going to take part of the army and you're going to fight through the mountains, where I'm going to take the other and I'm going to go to Palermo. And he says, and I'm going to beat that British, he calls him a limey, SOB, to Messina. And Bradley's like, why? You're trying to make a bigger splash. He's like, no, I'm trying to end this fight. I'm trying to trap them on this island. In Patton's mind, this is all justified. He tells Lucian, Prescott, look, I need you to do an amphibious landing. I need you to be at this area in 3 days. And Prescott's like, I've been fighting and dying for just mere feet, for mere yards. I don't know if I can do it. And Patton's like, look, if you don't, I'll find somebody who can. And the problem is, up in the mountains was the Hermann Göring division. All right, Göring is one of Hitler's right-hand men. He's in charge of the Air Force. And this is a very solid, tough, determined German division. Plus, they've got geography and terrain that they can use for their advantage. And so Patton is going to split his forces, kind of like Robert E. Lee, at whether you're looking at whether Antietam or at Chancellorsville. Here he goes, and Patton takes off. And what he does is he uses an old tactic. You cannot not follow through with this request. Patton says, hey, I'm going to send out some scouts. Let's say, okay, guys, we hear that there is Germans in Carborough. So you guys are going to go to Carborough. You're going to scream and yell and say it's full of Germans. You're going to request permission for reinforcements. I can call headquarters and move up the rest of the army. So his guys going to Carborough, oh my God, Nazis everywhere. And Patton radios permission. He gets permission to move his men into Carborough. Then he says, okay, guys, you're going to go down to Southern Village. And you're going to get there and you're going to scream to high heaven that there's Germans all over Southern Village. I will bring up the rest of the army. And then you're going to hear that there are Germans in Pittsburgh. And so by leapfrogging and does this, he moves farther and farther and farther west. Then he turns north and he captures the city of Messina, all right, or the city of Palermo, excuse me. And on the way, his men are marching through the heat and the dust and the hard Scrabble mountains and towns of Sicily. And Stars and Stripes newspaper reporter there, Ernie Pyle, was there to chronicle just how difficult it is. And a cartoonist named Bill Malden's going to invent two characters named Willie and Joe, kind of like, Chippendale. You can only tell them apart by their noses. And about the life of what's going on in this battle. And Patton shows up in his Jeep screaming, yelling, and cussing, and the men decide to call him Blood and Guts, right? It is his guts, but their blood that is being spilled on this mission. And there's a story where Patton's men are being strafed on this mountain switchback road over a one-lane bridge. And normally when we're in class, we talk about this. And there is a donkey cart that is terrified by the Luftwaffe shooting the heavy American trucks, and it's blocking the road. And a bunch of guys are, trying to move these donkeys, but they won't. Well, Patton shoots them and throws them off the side right in front of their farmer. Now, what few people know is that Patton replaced those donkeys out of his own money, but it's kind of like, well, here's a dog to replace the one that I got rid of. But in Patton's mind, I can't let this entire column get shot up for a couple of donkeys, so we have to move forward. So this is where you begin to either love Patton or you hate Patton. And here's some of the nasty fighting. Here's some of the Tommies fighting through the rubble. Here's American medics helping to give aid, and Hershey bars as the poor people, the peasants of Sicily, are really beginning to suffer. It's much more difficult than anybody realizes. But by this time, American supplies are coming ashore. Here is the Gulf of Gala where Patton landed. Now we've got soldiers, we've got reinforcements, we've got kind of bucket brigade guys bringing things, ashore. The buildup is okay, but you gotta trap the Germans on this island. And so as Patton enters Palermo, he gets a radio call that he is not to enter Palermo at any cost. And now here's where Patton starts to get insubordinate. He says, send a message back saying, I've already captured Palermo. Would you like to give it back? And he announces publicly that he is going to beat that British hero to Messina if it's the last thing that he does. And as they're going across the northern road to Messina, the Germans have set up a defensive perimeter. And he orders Lucian to do another amphibious landing and get behind them in just a couple of days. And they put this in a famous George C. Scott movie. It's slow going, and Patton goes up and he sees this colonel. The colonel's like, gosh, General, we're trying. And Patton's like, look, if you're not down to that beach in 3 hours, I'm going to replace you. And he turns, who's your executive officer? Who's your XO? Well, that's me, sir. And he's like, I'm going to put you in charge, and if you're not there in 3 hours, then I'm going to fire you too. And then there's these tanks that are stuck by this canal. And all of a sudden, the commander hears a voice. Commander, get that tank across this ditch right away. And they look over, and on the other side is Patton, on the German side of the creek. And they're like, how the hell did you get over there? And he's like, this sewer is only 3 feet deep right down there. I've done the reconnaissance. Put that map and let's go. And people are freaked out. But Patton's hard driving, never giving his men a break, makes it to Messina about 2 hours ahead of the British. However, a couple things happen. Number one, the Allies are going to lose about 38,000 casualties, killed, wounded, and missing. And because it takes over a month, it means that some of the Germans are going to escape for the second time. They escaped North Africa, and now they escape Sicily. All right, about 300,000 are going to make it across the Straits of Messina. From where Messina is to the toe, the mainland toe of Italy, is only about 3 miles. So Patton is like, great, now we're going to have to fight them for the third time. On a positive, the famous Italian soldier, Benito Mussolini, will be overthrown. The people of Italy will rise up, they will depose him, and 200,000 Italian soldiers are going to surrender. Again, the Italians are on whatever side is winning. And so the problem is there are going to be reprisals on the people of Italy, because the Germans will actually shoot a bunch of soldiers because they don't know if they can trust them. But Hitler's empire is slowly shrinking. They've been kicked out of North Africa. They are surrendering or retreating in Russia. And now Sicily is done. Now comes the invasion of southern Europe, where we are going to land in Italy. The problem, however, will come with Patton. And we had a former teacher who said this was his great uncle. Patton did not like what was known as, what we know now as post-traumatic stress syndrome. Back then it was seen as combat fatigue. And we know now that studies that I think I told you guys this before, for 3 days in combat, you can operate on a superhuman level, right? You know, you can see clear, hear better, smell better for about 3 days. Then after 72 hours, you kind of plateau, and then after 10 days, you sharply, drop off, and you get what's known as the 1,000-yard stare, where you become kind of like a robot. Well, after landing in Gela and marching across to western Sicily and up to Palermo, then over to Messina, some of his guys are just tired. They're dehydrated, they haven't slept well, they haven't eaten well, there's the constant fear and taunt of getting shot, there's the explosion of German artillery, and some guys just need a break. And we will learn later that 24 to 48 hours away from the front line, a good night's sleep where your body can relax and not feel in danger, or a couple good hot meals, and you're right back in the game. Well, Patton would go in and visit the wounded men who he saw were, gloriously wounded in combat. And there's a soldier there sitting there just shaking, just uncontrollable. The guy really couldn't help it. And Patton's like, "What the heck is wrong with you?" "I don't know, sir. It's just my nerves. I just can't stop." And he's like, "You're nothing but a coward." And everyone is like, "What? This man has fought across the island." And he's like, "I will not have you in here. He tells the doctors, "Get this man out of here." And the guy's like, "But General, I just can't stop." He's like, "You're going back to the front. You may get killed, but by God, you will not stink up this place of honor." Then he takes out his gloves and he knocks the helmet off the guy's head. Doesn't hit him, but he hits the helmet. Now, this is a big no-no. A commanding officer cannot strike an enlisted man. It's in full view of everybody. Patton's mouth has already gotten him in trouble with being insubordinate to Eisenhower, with calling Montgomery names, and this is just too much. Patton should be court-martialed. But there's some behind-the-scenes things that we will get to later, hopefully, if we are back in class. And Patton is in his chateau, believing that he is going to lead the American army into Italy, when Eisenhower gives him a cable. And everybody wanted Patton's head on a platter. But Eisenhower will intervene and say, "No, we are going to need George, or we're going to need George in combat sooner or later." But court-martialing him won't have the effect of humbling him. So Eisenhower makes him apologize to the enlisted man. Then the entire 7th Army is lined up, and Patton has to apologize for his actions to them. For a man of Patton's ego, this is just titanic. And then he will be resigned. He will forced to be resigned from the 7th Army. And for the next year, he is going to be used as a tour guide. He will be moved around. He will be, in effect, sat on the bench, put on the practice squad, having to stew at what he had done. He is going to come back, but this is the last we will see of General George Patton for quite a while. If we don't get back to school, I'm going to do the invasion of Tarawa in the Pacific to try and do this, timeline-wise, and then we will invade Italy. So when you start watching these, hit me up for the Google Classroom code, and I can upload your test and answer sheet once I figure out how to make this online answer sheet. All right, Great American. Hope to see you guys soon.